Hey guys, it's Vince. Today in this video, we are going to be covering a client's plug cable bill. I've gotten a lot of questions saying, Vin, I want to see you solder on camera. How do you prep the connector? How do you do everything from, ground zero all the way up? I've seen the bits and pieces videos that you put up, but I want to see the whole project. Well, today you're going to see it. So first and foremost, you need a rotary file for your Dremel tool, okay? Look up rotary file. I recommend getting the Dremel brand because this one works and lasts. After you get that, you will need a bit, and you can see right here, this is a chamfer bit so that we make sure that we can clean our holes on our connector. You're going to need a 3mm tap to chase the holes on that connector. This is optional, guys. You do what you want with your connector, and the reason I'm saying that is because many of you will say, well, I don't need to do that, whatever. I'm telling you what I do. This is how I build my cables. This right here is a tap holder. Very simple. And essentially, we've got a large HY connector here. I've already disassembled it. You've got the stress relief, we've got the casing, and we have, of course, the large HY connector and the locking ring, which locks this onto your spindle. Okay, many of you are familiar with this. So what we're going to do is want to make sure that this is already prepped properly so that there's no funny business when I go to assemble this. And that means that we want to chamfer all these holes slightly to make sure that there's no burrs, okay? And once again, you want to take your time with this. This is for the set screw that is used to secure this spindle plug from turning. And I'll show you how small it is. Approximately, I think it's 2mm in size. Let me show you exactly what we're working with here. Okay. Now you want to test this after you've chamfered it to make sure the hole engagement is correct. And that set screw should go right in, just like that. Take it back out. Beautiful. I recommend doing this twice because you, once again, don't want any surprises when you go to assemble your connector. That's done and deburred. Next, you have these two holes right here. You're going to go in these two holes, and this is for your stress relief. You're going to go through these properly with the 3mm tap. Start the hole, lock it in. Once again. We start the threading process. And just go all the way through. And you want to do this till you virtually have no resistance. That means all the way through. Okay. You'll notice if you bottom out the threads on the tap and you back out, it should come right out like glass. Just like that. Go to your next hole. Insert your tap handle again. Here, bring it in. Carefully come in. So once again I get questioned, why are your cables so expensive? Because no one does this. Not the way they should. This is the way it should be done, because if you do it this way, you're guaranteeing yourself virtually perfect assembly, no surprise. And that's what we want. Brush, clean it off. Now that you know that those holes have been chased, you're still not satisfied. You want to make sure that the screws that are for your stress relief will not give you any issues. They want to go in here, just like this. And I know I'm using a flathead, I'm just testing to see if these screws go in. There should be no resistance, should go in like butter, and they do. That's one. Now I'm also going to use the same screw in simulation, meaning the opposite screw in the opposite hole. Why do I do that? Because if there's an anomaly on a screw, I want to see if that's bad too. It's called quality control. So we come in here, same process. Checking, checking. Everything is feeling like glass. That's perfect. Many of these screws that come from the factory are not perfectly tapped. Keep that in mind when you're assembling, and once again, use common sense. Okay, Now what we're going to do is finalize these holes, but once again, we're going to chamfer them carefully. Okay, done. And you just do it by hand. I'm not using a lot of pressure. I don't need to. Just making sure that everything's clean. Now, that's complete. Next step of the process, start cleaning up. Keep your area as clean as possible. These I'll start cleaning up as I go. You guys are going to notice right here, this lip on the inside of this connector. Now I use double wool heat shrink, and to make this connector essentially molded on, I'm going to Dremel this open with the rotary file very carefully. But before I do that, here's something you don't hear a lot of people talk about in this industry. We're going to talk about PPE, personal protection equipment. You're going to want goggles because naturally a rotary file is going to dispense a lot of little particulate in the air, and we also want masks. And I use a surgical mask and I use another mask over because this is very, very fine particulate, and that debris we don't want to breathe naturally because we care about our lungs and we care about our eyes. So we're going to put this on. Now, the thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that the mask, when you use in conjunction with goggles, typically will steam up. So you have to adjust the mask carefully under your nostrils to make sure they're protected and you can see. Okay, I've also got a fan here, and this little fan is going to keep the particulate blown away. And the idea is naturally that you're not going to ingest anything naturally if it's blown away. So, in conjunction with our mask, in conjunction with our goggles, 12,000 RPM on the Dremel. Now you notice I'm not going back and forth. I'm only going in one direction. It gives you better control, and I'm letting the tool do the work. Let's see what we're left with. Right here, this edge. Now, we're going to kill our Dremel, which are end mill. Now we're going to go to a rotary bit, rotary standard bit. Same RPM, you're just going to kiss it. All I'm doing is feathering this very lightly and looking good. Now we have these little edges right here. I always feel to see if this is smooth, because if it's not smooth, when you go to spin this on, because it's threaded and lock on, it can actually leave marks on your cables. So what I like to do is just come in here and just kiss them a little bit, and that feathers this edge so we don't have any issues with burr marks on our cable. Just get it nice and light. Very little, do the edges, do the other. Details count, guys. If this was your cable, this is what you'd want done. Now we're done with the Dremel. Take it out, switch up. Okay, now get our Zippy deburring tool. And we come in here and we just kiss it. That way we make sure we have no burrs that's going to scratch our cable. We got a perfect connector right here. Now we're prepped. Okay. Now I'm going to go clean this connector. I'll hit with compressed air. So we're all good. We have no particulate, and she's done. You can see this is perfect. It's super smooth. Nothing's going to get hurt. You just carve it out and you feel good. And you notice I'm not using force here. I see guys use these tools in videos and they're just digging and you don't have to do that. Well, you shouldn't. And if you do, you want to change your tip, but realistically, this is perfect. Flawless. Okay, I'm going to go and clean this, blow it out. We'll cut the video here and I'll come back and I'll show you now the next process. Okay guys, I'm prepping the cable now. I've got my template here so I know exactly the length I need to cut off the end of the cable as far as the casing using a straight edge razor blade. Okay, now you see the level of detail required to do this the right way, because we do have two shields underneath here and we want to make sure that yes, we are going to remove these shields, but want to do it with precision because we don't want a slop job. This is once again a client's cable. It needs to be assembled correctly. And you can see I already went in and made a nice incision. Everything is clean. Switch to razor blade. Razor blades wear out quickly, so do not use a dull blade. Do not use a blade that is from Lowe's other than a straight edge. I don't recommend using utility knives and things like that. Those are half-assed ways of doing it. Use a straight edge. There we go. When you get it right, you're using, once again, this is my DS Flexion cable. Links are going to be in the video description. I'm doing it very carefully. You see how I'm breaking it all the way across? So we don't need to do anything. We're just going to pull. And if we do this carefully, we're going to loosen it up and it'll just come right off. You'll see what you're left with. We just wiggle it just a little bit. And we're good here. Here it comes. Right off. So there's the piece of casing and you can see what you're left with. Just a nice, clean piece of cable. Here's where it's exposed naturally. Put your razor blade back Safety first. Now, I'm going to take a probe. This probe is going to carefully come in between our first shield, which is tin braided copper. And I get a lot of messages where guys will buy my cable and go, I can't find a shield drain. Well, you got to do this carefully. And the idea here is not to disrupt the shield drain. You want to find it. So you can see the level of detail I'm doing this. I'm not ham-fisting this and going like this. This is precision. Take your time. You're not in a rush. Don't do this when you get off work at 10 o'clock at night and you're bored and you decide you want to get your machine running, and that's when you don't want to do this. Now, if we look carefully, right here is our shield drain, right there. You can see it. So now what I'm going to do is feather these out. Okay, we're just going to keep feathering them out. Patience is a virtue. It's not about speed. It's about doing it right. Okay, slow it down, rotate. All I'm doing is combing the hairs, right, in your area. Next, flush cutters. And come in, trim. Do this very easily. And mark my words, you definitely want something on your feet, because you will get these in your feet, ask me how I know, and they are very uncomfortable. So always keep something on your feet if you're not sweeping your shop up immediately, which you should be. Once again, I'm feathering out the hairs, see them? The goal here is, once again, we're going to trim these, give them a haircut. We want to make sure that when we go in here, in the terms of making them short enough to be inserted inside the cable's casing, because this is a shield, which means it will be connected to a ground, and we don't want any potential for a ground to make conduction to a hot lead, or you would result in a dead short, which could result in a fatality, potentially, God forbid, or a fire. You can see what we're doing here, just real careful. Closer you can get without damaging your casing, the better off you are. Just be patient, take your time. Okay, you can see what we've got now. This is nice, it looks good, it's clean. The main thing is you're not disrupting your shield drain. Okay, any edges, once again, just come in, touch, touch. Now we're left with our shield drain right here. So what I'm going to do is get this probe in between the shield drain and lift it. Now I can come over here and properly twine it. What I'm doing is joining the shield drain. Why am I doing that? Because this is much easier to work on when this becomes a singular unit. Okay? Now, clean your desk, iron on. Going 752 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see once again now our lead exposure. Everything here is set. We're going to use our solder and flux. Bring this in. Kester 186 RMA, once again available in my store. Kester number 44 solder, once again available in my store. Both are going to be linked in the video description. Let that go. You notice how you see the flux just hanging off, touching the solder. Done. And that just bound that perfectly. You can see I'm not going for full wetting. I'm just going to tin them to make sure that these are bound together. That's all we care about. Okay, now we're clean. Looks nice, right? Got our Mylar foil. You can see where it's starting. We don't want that to come undone, and I'm going to show you why. So now what we're going to do is we want to heat the cable so we can relax it so we can once again insert a probe and make sure that the fibers from the tin-braided copper first shield will be inserted underneath the casing where it's safe. Then we'll dissect the Mylar foil and also continue dissecting the cable until we get it to look and act exactly as we need to assemble. Take the heat gun, set it up. I just rotate it. You're just doing a little roticity out. Nylon probe. Slow and steady wins the race, right? You definitely don't want to overheat the cable. If you overheat the cable, you're going to cook it. Temperature on my gun is set at 450, and then you work it. And then you better learn how to work it carefully, because if you screw it up, you're going to shorten the cable. You got to cut the end off with that. So practice is where this comes in. Good. Now I'm going to switch over to a shark probe. It's rounded. You got to be very careful with this. What we do is we just feel it through. Make sure this is nice and clean. You notice how clean that cable's look. Done. Now we're left with no more fibers. Everything is clean. Just have the shield drain coming out, and we have our Mylar foil. We put our heat gun back. It's right now cooling down. That's why it switches over in RPM. And now we're ready to dissect our Mylar foil, and you can see it already started. I'm not pulling this tight. I'm just removing it carefully. I'm going to move my shield drain down so I have clearance. And now what I'm going to do is take my flush cutters like a surgeon and come in here very carefully right there. And if you're good, you should be able to peel it like a banana. Foil gone. Now you see our cotton separators from our leads, and that signifies this is UltraFlex. And once again, those cotton separators make sure that we don't have any internal lead fractures from, once again, a cable chain installation. So now what we're going to do is carefully, I come in and insert it. You notice I'm in a vertical format. Snip, then I use very light pressure and pull. Okay. Same principle. Starting to look like a cable or something. Close as you can get it, makes it neat. Now, lay the cable down. Once again, cleanliness keeps your mind sane. Keep your area clean. I'm going to take the cotton separators. I'm going to keep them grouped. You'll notice they're in a group on leads. Keeping it in a group. Flush cutters, hence the term flush. Come over here carefully, right up against casing, snip, done. Now, I'm going to say same thing. Done. Take your shield drain. Once again, now it's joined, so you can carefully bend it back into place. That's not a problem. Remember, shield drain on this end is not going to be terminated only gets terminated on the VFD end. Now what we're going to do, bring these out, and you might notice some of these will fall in between the conductors, in which case get yourself that nylon probe again. We don't want to scratch up any casing and degrade our cable. You want to get these out as much as possible. Once that's done, you hold them with your finger, flush cutter up against casing, and carefully remove. Okay, you guys can see now that we've still got a little bit of the cotton separators that are protruding past where our casing is. And of course, we got our shield. So what we're going to do, I fold these over carefully, coming in on an angle, trim as close as I can. Carefully. The idea here, of course, is that you do not want to cut your casing on any of your conductors. If you're close, like I am right here, you grab with the flush cutter, pull back, and then cut. And the reason you do that is that then when you go to instigate the cut, you're not going to accidentally cut into any of your conductors. See, I'm pulling. Pull away from it. Pull away from it. Good there. Everything coming in. Does not have to be absolutely perfect. In a perfect world it would be, but it doesn't have to be, because I'm going to show you why. You will notice that inside you will always get a piece of the cotton as a separator internally. Don't worry about that. That's cut low enough. If it is long, you can come in like this and you can carefully cut. Once again, if you make contact with a conductor, and I cannot emphasize this enough, there are guys out there that are the it's good enough crowd. When I'm selling a cable to a client, it's not never good enough. It's got to be right, number one, and it's got to be safe. So if I nick this, I'm starting over. That tells you why I charge what I do. There is no room for error here. These are three-phase, once again, power cables, in the sense that these three leads, the red, the white, and the black, will all be providing a 110-volt leg, and then, of course, we have our ground. We do not want these casings to be compromised on any of these. So keep that in mind. If you're that person that thinks, oh, I can do this, and then they accidentally cut a lead, and you think you're going to go with that, you better hope to Jesus that you never, God forbid, have a fire in your shop, because if they investigate the cable, you're in trouble. So keep that in mind. And once again, you can see here what we're left with now. Now, heat, once again, is going to be your friend. Bring the heat gun over. We're just going to heat this up. And as we heat it, the casing of the cable becomes soft. Right now it's cool in the shop. It's probably about 60 degrees, maybe 55. So I'm just rotisserie it and let that heat get nice and soft. See how leads are just buttery soft. Now what we'll do, once again, nylon probe. Now you know why these cables cannot be bulk made if they're made correctly. Because there's no automated way to do this, not yet anyways. And we just keep working it. Once again, we are getting there. Switch over to our Metal probe. Carefully insert. I'm just checking depth now, more or less. Making sure everything here looks good. Done. So here's what we're left with now. And now you can see, I'll go over this with a fine-tooth comb. And we always clean the edge of the cable. Because cleanliness is next to godliness. It's detail, guys. Make sure everything is nice and clean. You can see there, you've got one hell of a clean cable. That's exactly what we want. Everything here is set, and your pliable casing is now set. And the only thing we have now that's actually exposed is our shield ring. Now, I left that to last. I'm gonna show you why. When you fold the cable, it gets longer. See that? There it is. So we're gonna take this. And the reason we want it to get long, like you just saw it, we're going to grab our flush cutters and carefully, good size, pull back, and just pull. Now pull back straight. By doing that, shield drain's gone. Now you can see what we're left with, right? Got a little bit of casing right here. Yeah. Here's our shield drain, and if you're careful, you won't shoot that sucker across your shop. Overall, cable is looking good. Any loose pieces of casing then can be carefully removed, and you're golden. Now we can see what we're left with. Now what I like to do is take these conductors and heat them. And what that does, it just relaxes the conductor's back. There we go. And we're beautiful. So now what we're going to do, these are all nice and soft. Now we're ready to remove the casing so that we can get the length proper for insertion into our connector. Now, I have done this for years, so therefore I do not need to measure. If you do need to measure, you'll want to watch my video dealing with making a template to know how far back to cut your conductors. You're also going to notice, if you look here carefully, the white lead is slightly longer than my ground. The reason that is because it's going on the top, which will be terminal number 1. And when it's on the top, being it's a diagonal configuration, being a little longer, it'll insert easier into this connector. Okay, that's totally up to you. It's what I choose to do. So again, you just start now, and you're going to want to set, and these I love. These are 90-degree flush cutters, excuse me. So these 90-degree flush cutters will allow you to hold it like this, and then once again go around and incise your conductors to give you the proper length you need. So in this case, I'm going to come back right about here, and I'm using very light pressure. What I do is just work it in. You do not want to ham fist this and pull. Guys are always pulling and using more power than required. You don't need to do that. When you're using the tools properly, the only way you want this tool to work is by letting it cut. And the only way it's going to cut is if you use slight pressure and let it incise the casing. And once that's done, you're golden. Now you're left with your conductors. Beautiful copper conductor. What we want to do now is we're going to get our iron hot. Once again, it's been resting. It's in standby mode. I'm going to apply flux. And here's the thing about the flux. You're going to see a track. Being it's liquid, it's going to go inside. You do not want to get solder inside of your casing, or this will become solid. So what you want to do is pay very close attention. We're just going to tin the tip, so this is still flexible. Carry over right here, boom, done. Touch and done. See how we still have that copper on the base? This is all now still perfectly flexible, and that's golden. Now what we're going to do, move to the next conductor. Same thing. You notice the time this is taking, guys? You realize that that's where, again, if we look here at the black and red conductors, not to change the subject, but the black conductor is slightly longer, no big deal. But the time here, as I was saying, that is why this costs what it does. You notice this time I'm going slightly higher than the white conductor because I can always take my casing and press it down. I'll show you what I mean. Done. Perfect. Isn't that nice? Okay, throw that out. Like I said, if you're lucky, you won't shoot your casing all over the shop. I'm horrible with that. Flux, make sure your iron is hot enough. Come up again, slight touch, right to the tip. Done. You have to rotate, rotate. There you go. You see that copper? You're going. Now, you see how the red is slightly higher than the white? Just come in with your nice pair of needle nose pliers and carefully press down on the casing. If casing sticks, you add some heat to it because PVC will get soft as it's heated. Remember, gentle. Everything is gentle. Level it up. Next. Okay. Now, the white and the ground, meaning the white lead and the ground has got to naturally go in slightly lower than the white because once again we're diagonal and we want the ground to be in depth and then everything engages. Hard to explain, you'll see it shortly. Trust me when I say cut that ground slightly lower, or you can always adjust it the way I just showed you with the needle nose pliers. Keep your tools neat on your desk, let you think better. Yeah, we're gonna do this nice. Right there. Sharpest part of your flush cutters is going to be your tip. Press lightly. Done. The goal here, and as you practice, I recommend practicing on other conductors, preferably not your cable, to see the amount of pressure you need because you don't want to cut your copper conductors ever. Okay? That's all conductive mass and we don't want to reduce that. So now, like I said to you, this is slightly lower than the white. See it? So we got here, everything's beautiful. We can come in. Same principle. Flux is on. That iron get hot. So. And there you go. Okay, next one. You notice our casing, everything is perfect. We're not melting, we're not cooking, we're not doing anything. And you shouldn't have to because essentially all we're doing is using the iron for the proper amount of heat, using the flux where it's required. And this is flux core solder, but you can tell there's not nearly enough flux as applying it this way. And your penetration factor there is exactly where it should be. Now what we're going to do, matching up the red and the black. Why is that? Because they're going to be in parallel, meaning they're going to be horizontally across from each other when they're installed in the connector. So what we want to do, line this up, same principle. Come in. I go a little higher than the red for the same idea that I can make an adjustment rather than cut too short. You cut too short, you're SOL. So, once again, soft hands lead to great rewards. You'll notice also if your flush cutters need to be replaced, you'll notice that you will not get a clean cut. This is a clean cut. Everything here is good. Do not keep using tools that are dated, old, from your step grandfather's uncle, or whoever it's from. Make sure that the tools are appropriate for the job. This is precision work. And when I say precision work, you can see what I'm doing here. This is not for you to use tools that are dated or ultra cheap. Right there. If you get that little solder on the tip like that, you can see it's built up. Don't worry about it. Add a little flux. Flux is going to make it track. Done. Perfect. Now we got something, boys and girls. What do you think? Work? All right, let's see what we can do. All right. So now what we have here is the conductors are essentially set to go. And when we come in here, we'll make sure everything is going to engage and make adjustments upon that should it be required. As a matter of fact, we come in here like this, and I'm not even jigging this. This is just set. You can see exactly where we are right there. Okay, so I actually left myself a little leeway, and I'm going to cut this down slightly because we don't need to be that long. So I'll just remove. Now these conductors are all tinned. So if you do have to remove any more casing, you just do it the same way you've seen me do it prior. The only difference is these are not going to move now. So you want to use very gentle force and go in and reduce the length of these accordingly. So I'll just start with red and we'll go down. I'm just going to go down a little bit right here. There's nothing wrong with doing this if you have to do it. Okay, done. See right there, now we've got a little deeper penetration so that when we come in, we're going to be right there, and that's golden. So we're good there, good there. We'll come on our black and do the exact same thing. Patience. You get it? You fell off. Can't see. Yep. Right on. Okay, our black and red are very, very close. We'll heat these guys up. These casings are very, very pliable. So as long as you heat them carefully and use a gentle touch, you can manipulate them wherever you need them to go. Now I'm just fine-tuning everything. So once that's done, you'll see. Okay. Now your conductors, I recommend, especially your black and your red, pivot them in a little bit because once again, they're going to be diagonal. So now we'll organize everything on our desk, grab our vise. Highly recommend a soft jaw vise. Come in. I've just got magnets on my bar here so it doesn't pivot. And I'm locking the connector in. This is soft jaw, will not leave marks. I come in with the shim to shim up the vise because this is a suction base vise, but of course I do not have a suction base in terms of glass or another substrate that will let it do that. So now what I'm doing is tip checking everything at the bottom. Come in here, make sure every conductor is in, and all I'm doing is a mock-up. Now we can see what we have, boys and girls. That is all set. There you go. So think like this. If it looks like this without solder, what do you think it's going to look like with solder? Right? I don't know how long this took. Well, I'll know when the video is done, but I can tell you right now, this is set. If you do need to adjust depth, meaning you need your conductors are too exposed, just trim them back. But everything here is set. So what I'm going to do now is I will look at potentially trimming some of these back just a hair. Finger in the front, because this will prevent your conductor from shooting these little suckers across the room. Clean tip. There you go. Right back in. You can see what we're left with. Right there. That one will go in. Once they're all pretty much seated, you're in. Just like that. How's it look? I can't see on that side, but I'm pretty sure we're pretty good. That looks good. So overall, this is what we should have when we're building for a client. And again, I will have to adjust. And what a lot of guys don't realize is when I'm soldering, I'm ambidextrous. I had to convince myself that you can't go over the top. Many of you try to go over the top to hit this side. You can't do it, not safely. So I had to teach myself to be ambidextrous and solder just as good with my left as my right. So again, a little bit different. This is technique. It's not just, you know, looking at this and saying, well, it's only 4 joints. A lot of guys look at this and go, it's only 4 joints. Why is it so expensive? Do the 4 joints. Where are they located? How are they located? Consider this, the ground is on the bottom. So these have to be peeled away so you can get your iron in there to drop a bead. Now, think about what I just said. You got to drop a bead in the middle, right there. And you have to do it consistently without burning any other casing or not getting the proper wetting action you need in that cup. Okay? So that, again, in itself takes time. So now what we're going to do, now we have our connector in. These are all set to go. Come in here again. I'm just checking my ground. I'm bending these out of the way because the ground goes first. Naturally, you would start with your ground because it's the one that's going to be the hardest to actually solder because of this. You can see exactly where we are. Right there. Coming in. If you do need it to come back, once again, you know the process. You would heat. That's the first process. Always start with the easiest way to give you the minimal clearance. Meaning, I'm not going to start removing more casing right away. I would start with reducing the casing size by using the pliers because that would allow me to adjust without removing casing where you can't put it back. So you always mitigate by doing the least intrusive method followed by the most intrusive method, right? Right. Okay, now that we've covered that, we'll move forward with how we're going to do this. Once again, conductors, easiest way to move them out of the way safely, heat them. Right? Slightly. You soften the casing without damaging. Okay guys, I just went and cut the proper heat shrink that I need to finish this cable. You notice I have 3 stages of sizes for the end cap to insulate these conductors. Why do I do that? Because by using a set of 3, incrementally going larger to smaller or vice versa, it allows me to test and see which one provides me the best fit. When the cable is assembled, you won't be able to disassemble it. Okay? It's the thought process above the fact of just soldering that gets you out of trouble. If you don't do that and think ahead, you will paint yourself potentially in a corner. So you can see we have 1 longer piece of heat shrink, 1 slightly smaller piece of heat shrink. Once again, this will be internal of this piece of heat shrink, meaning this gets on first on the cable, this goes over that when it's shrunk, and then we have our insulator for the conductors here. So now I'm going to insert them on the cable in proper sequence. This is critical. If you're assembling your cable and you already have the other end done, you could paint yourself in a corner very quickly. So pay close attention to what you were doing. Take your conductors, now that we've already went over everything, we take our conductors, we already know we need our first piece of heat shrink, and you can see how square I make sure all of my cuts are perfectly square, again, to give the client the best product. Inspect them. Now we open up. Now this is double wall with adhesive, so we're going to apply this. This goes in first. And what I recommend is don't slide it all the way down the cable. Start with here so you're actually keeping visualization of what you're doing if you've never done this before. Second piece of heat shrink, the slightly smaller piece. check your edges. Everything should be clean, acceptable, and looking good. Once again, double wall heat shrink with adhesive. Come over here. And now you're starting to see how the cable is going to be assembled. Meaning you're going to start shrinking from the top down. And you'll see how that all falls in. Now we take our connector that we did. And you'll see this connector just slides right down perfect. Now you're starting to see how the assembly will take place. Next, your locking ring connector that's threaded that will be used to engage the spindle. You want to make sure that this is properly inserted over the plug. If you do not insert this correctly and do it the opposite way, once again, you paint yourself in a corner. So I always check it 3 times for a fit. And then I take it just like this and I will apply it. Now in this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm just showing you exactly how to do that, because now what we're going to do is put our insulators, which are pieces of double wall heat shrink, for our conductors. I start with the largest piece and I work my way down to the smallest piece. I'm done. So now you see exactly what we have here. And then the final step, once again, this slides down. Boom. Everything here is starting to look perfect. Now what we'll do is take this, slide this over, and we'll do it just the way I said. Like this. 1, 2, 3. Fits perfect. Rules of 3, meaning you check something 3 times, the odds of you getting it wrong is very, very slim. Very slim. So again, you can see where the threads are. That's exact. You drop it. There's your assembly. So you see this will engage the connector first, then we go over with our heat shrink over our conductors over here. Casing will then, the metal casing will then thread on, and then we continue the process with the heat shrink until it's complete. So now we can take this and go all the way down, take this and go all the way down. Okay, keep it low and on the go. Yeah. Connector once again goes back in the mount. We're all set. Lock it in, make sure you're square. Clean your desk. Once again, keeping things clean, less confusion. You see guys with a whole bunch of shit all over their desk, all you're doing is making confusion. And if you've never done this before, that confusion will screw up your mind. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. There we go. See if she can get that. So I'm going to come in here now. Everything is looking good. Do our final mock-up. I'm going to now reheat the conductors so we can get them out of the way. Before we go with. Right now. That's that. Fold that down. Tuck that in. So now what we're going to do is just come in here. Little bit of flux. Make sure our iron is hot. You will need your iron set much hotter for this because these are thicker conductors. So now what I'm going to do, very little solder. I'm just going to kiss it. I don't want a lot, just enough. And the reason I don't want a lot is because by this tin, what's going to happen when I apply the flux, being it's liquid, it's going to flow right over this piece and it will make a pocket, and that solder will naturally use capillary action and fill this conductor up. You notice how it's all set. Okay, we're good. I'm going to insert that right there. And this is where you need a pretty steady hand, because if you screw up, you're starting over. Now I'm going to build this solder up. I'm certainly not going to try to fill this all in one go. Done. Not too much to it when you have the jigging process complete. Now you see the bubble I have there. I'm going to apply a little flux over it, not crazy. I'm going to let the iron do the job. Now the thing is here is you want to keep applying solder And you want to do it in a format that allows this to melt properly. And there it goes. And you hear that little capillary action working. Done. We're letting that solder flow. Right there. I just keep applying flux, and now with that heat, I just keep building it and building it. And all these experts that do soldering, they don't show you this because they usually don't follow this process, and to each their own. But I'm telling you right now, this works excellent. You see the conductor actually loosened up. Boom. Don't worry about the carbon. A little bit of carbon on there, that will come right off. Matter of fact, we'll move that right now. And I think I've said this before in previous videos, I like to use my own solder remover, which is citrus based. I do not like alcohol. A lot of guys like that crap, and I get tired of smelling it. So just not into it. Each their own. But conductor is coming out beautiful. You can see it right there. Boom. We'll come in again, fill it again. You notice how I'm compressing the cable. I have it pinned, everything is set. A little bit of solder. We're not getting conduction. I'll add more solder, but I'd rather have less than too much. Now, if I'm going to add more solder, I'm going to come back in here and keep applying flux. Do not let that dry. Have it to where you have enough flux so that the solder will work. Just like that. Good. Now what I'm waiting for, I let that heat penetrate. And when it penetrates correctly, you will see the solder flow. There we go. Clean that in there. So when I hear guys say, Vin, you charge too much for a cable. Do I? You guys see this. Look at that conductor. You see that in camera? Look at this. That's what it should look like. Right. Now, what we're going to do, and again, I don't know, I'll get a little contrast here. I'll put this here so you can see just how smooth that is. Casing is perfect. Nothing here is burned, destroyed, nothing. We're golden. So now what we're going to do, take our white lead, come into the top, insert. If I'm having trouble, sometimes just come in here like this. I'm going to do the same thing. Just check your fit. Make sure everything is a go. That looks good. Right there. So the conductor we already know mocks up perfectly. I always check everything because don't ever take anything for granted. As a matter of fact, when you do it right, it sits. Not doing anything. So now what I'm going to do is the same process. Come in, flux, clean your area, teeny bit of solder, a little bit more. Tip needs to be cleaned. Always clean your tip too, because nobody likes a dirty tip. Done. Very little. Once again, we're not trying to fill. We're trying to make a bonding surface so that solder that we apply on top will wick, and it will happen as soon as we apply liquid flux. Boom. Fills that cup. I can then adjust positioning just by pressing, and we're golden. I'm going to move this cup over. And you see why I use a vise. because a vise gives you the perfect amount of pressure holding this connector. Now we're going to come in again. Don't cook it, you're just letting the solder do its job. So now, what I'm going to do, that's tacked. So what I'm going to do is get that black lead articulated so we can get it engaging in its conductor. Or actually, we'll get it so we can engage its connector, which is right there. Get that in there. Right there. You're in. Get the red to engage in its conductor. And you're in. So everything there, once again, we check everything, looks good. I'm doing this slow for the camera. I would not naturally be going this slow otherwise, but you can see exactly what we have here. Everything will mate perfectly. You would shift the cable as required to tack and then move forward. So now I'll do the same process in reverse. Remove them. Once again, leaving them this long and being it's a flexible cable, you will not have an issue. Those are all set. Coming in. Flux. Let this heat up. And like I said, just keep applying flux. A lot of guys get stingy. I don't know why. You should be applying flux every single time. You notice I'm working the cable too. I'm holding the cable and I'm working it according to where I need it. Now I've got a little bubble here, so I'm just going to kiss that a little bit. We'll lower it. Let it melt. Done. Pocket action. You just heard it. I didn't add any solder on that. I just used the flux that was there. You can see how nice that pocket is. Adding it again. Building up to. We'll keep working. Do not worry about that carbon. You can still see that we're a little bit low. We're just going to hit more flux. You get that nice yellow tint, you know you're golden. Keeping that cable nice. We're in. Done too. Teeny bit more. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. We're not rushing. We're just going through and tacking where we need everything. Just teeny bit. That's it. Let's see what we got. Once again, sometimes you do have to remove the flux, and I always do it anyways, even though this is no clean. But I remove it because it gives me more visualization. See what's going on? Check that out. Right here, look at that. Glass. That's what we want. Once again, I cannot emphasize the proper products are what really instigate. When you understand them and working with them correctly, you will get the result you want. So now, we'll come over here to red. Save black for the end because he's fun. Come over here to red, do the same process. Tin perfect. In. Flux. Throw it in. Come in. Get that conductor where you need it. Also try to keep your cup centered. That's technical. I like to be as centered as possible. Everything there is set. Clean your desk. And you notice we'll come right in, fill it up. I'm angling myself. Keep it right on where we need it. That solder just runs right in. Oh, done. Done. So, now, if the conductor is not totally bottomed, that's fine. You can pivot the cable and add more pressure to get it properly bottomed. And again, even if you do have slight spacing in between your casing, that's okay because we don't want to heat or burn the casing either, but it shouldn't be excessive. So keep that in mind. Everything should be bottomed and nice and clean in best practice. That's the goal we're going for. See, in this case, I let it cool, then release. And you can see we're right on the money. It's looking good. As a matter of fact, you can notice the cable's actually pivoting itself. It wants to kind of pull that way, and that's normal. Because right now, that conductor is making full conductivity as far as being bonded to that metal terminal. So we're doing the same thing. Don't fight your solder either. Meaning, grab your solder if you need more, keep building. Remove any carbon from the tip, it should be immaculate, and let that flow. Still filling, looking great. How's it look on camera? I can't, I'm looking at it with the light.
Great.
Good. Okay. Okay, still a tiny bit low. Come on. The idea too, guys, is to make sure that that cup is filled, and you'll know when it stops bubbling. When you stop hearing that bubbling sound, I don't know if you can pick it up on camera, but when that goes away, boom, that's it. Clean it up. You notice I'm rolling backwards. The reason I do that, it doesn't disrupt my casing. So that's the whole principle behind that. Pay attention to what you're doing all the time. You don't want to screw up anything you've just done. That looks awesome. All right, guys, we got one final conductor over here. It's going to apply a little bit of flux. I've already applied some off camera. We're going to do it again. Crossover. This is where we got to be careful. Done. More flux. Now we're going to bend the lead carefully. If you did it right, mold itself right in. Right. Right in. You can see right here, we're perfect. Everything looks level. We're right on. I'm going to raise the light up a little bit because I have to get in there now. Lefty. And I'm going to do it carefully. Checking the bottoming. Okay. Everything good? That's good. Can't tell if I'm bottomed in or not. Now bottomed. Okay, right there. Okay. Let that iron always get to your maximum temperature. Do not attempt to solder with a cold iron. If it's been cooled off, let it heat up. Stay there for maybe at least a couple seconds. You notice I'm holding this with my left hand, hitting the iron with my right, and then I cross over. So I can hold my position. Coming in. hit it. Done. There you go. Got that nice pocket there, which is perfect. That flux is just gonna wick right in there. Beautiful. So I get guys that'll ask me, why don't you use paste flux? You certainly can, but liquid, you can see, does that capillary action, and that's what we like. You can see how that connector is coming out. Let me adjust my fan so I'm not inhalating all those fumes. Okay. And if you do this right, you're going to notice, once again, that flux sits on top. It becomes more like a river on top, and that's ideal. Because the longer the flux can stay there, you're going to get an even better connection. We got a teeny bit of solder, and I'm just going to keep building. A little bit more. And I believe we got it. So, doing this on camera is not easy. Mainly because Joanna has to hold everything and I'm trying to jig everything, so hopefully it came out well in the camera. But now you guys can see exactly how this process is completed. Once again, I'm feathering the Q-tip back, and that is what gives us perfect joints, and you can see that right there, the gold. Those are great. So the client will be very happy with that, should be very happy with that. Those are ideal. Smooth like glass. Everything there is looking good. Got a little carbon on the side. That off. Everything comes right off. Golden. You can see how your seating is. Everything there looking good. So now what we're going to do, a lot of guys will say, okay, just close it up, right? No, we don't want to close it up right away. What we want to do is we're going to heat the casing and heat the leads so they relax, because now they went through a little bit of trauma. So we're going to heat them. Once again, clean your desk. Everything should be clean. Solder out of the way. And try not to knock anything over. Now we heat the leads. This is going to make them relax. And that's exactly what we want. I also hit the casing, and I'm going to show you up. There you go. Now you can come up, and you can pull your casing up slightly. Not trying to make it abrupt, but we are wanting to relax these leads to where they're going to be happy in their new home. And that's exactly what we do. Remember, heat is going to make these softer, and that's why we work with this. Little by little, we'll get a nice, beautiful finish, and we'll be happy with these leads in our new house. They are super flexible. Everything looks great. Come over here and just move that. If anything is sticking or you want to move a lead, I recommend a toothpick that will not damage anything, and you can get in there and just articulate whatever you need to do. That's that. Now what we're going to do, once again, we're all set. We're going to take and begin final assembly, if I don't knock Joanna over. Okay. Because this is not an easy process to film, but we're going to check our size. We'll see which one we need. Okay, you'll notice this one is a little small. See? Right there, a little small. So what we do is we trim it. So we can go a little bit bigger, cut that off. Go to the next size. Now it all makes sense, don't it? What we're looking for is that. That's experience, guys. Right there. Knowing that you'd have to do that took me a lot of time to figure out it's much easier to do it that way than continue to make the same mistake. Try to mitigate all your time spent by looking at exactly what we're trying to do. Now, something else to point out that I didn't because I've done enough of these. Always make sure you check your ground is in its appropriate position, which should be on the bottom pin on a large HY connector, which this is, and you can see the ground symbol right there. So always know where your conductors are. In this case, we're golden. Everything here is set. I'm going to take this, move that up, and you can see the fit that we have right there. Fits beautiful. So we're going to come over here, begin the heating process. I take my two fingers very carefully, index and my thumb, and I work it around. And this heat is precision heat because I'm using the soldering station. I'm not just dispersing heat in, all over the entire connector because number one would burn my hand, of course, and number two, we want to control it. This is right now at 380 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's a little lower heat till we get the shrink going that we want. Remember, this has adhesive, so once it formulates a bond, and as soon as it's heated, that adhesive becomes active, and then everything there is becoming active as one. Now I'm going to let that cool a little bit. I'm just going to move it in a little bit. Don't want to put too many fingerprints on it because when it's hot, it will leave fingerprints. You hear the heat gun actually accelerating. The reason it is, it's cooling itself off. This is partially shrunk right now. Everything here is basically set. I'm going to let it cool for a second. I'll go over the same process and we'll do it again because this I want to come in. It just makes a better seam, I've noticed. Do it again. You'll notice the gun is still at the same operating speed, but now it's applying heat again. So we're good. We want this seam to meet. All we got to do is work it out. So, right there, build this up. Okay. And if you get any gaps, the easiest way to do it is just work it out. And I'll show you what I mean. Heat is your friend if it's applied properly. You got a tiny little gap right there, a couple millimeters. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat this and I'll bring it in. Watch this. Let the gun heat up. Now I went to the large heat gun. And again, trying to get everything seated. Let this cool for a second. Come in, heat, to make heat. You will not hurt the cable if you use this process, because the pulling motion when the PVC is warm is just going to basically remold it into position, which is essentially what we want to do. So we have that nice finished look. Like that. Same with. That's what we want to have. And you just keep working it till you get it. The patience is a virtue. You can get it perfect. It just takes practice. Stay with it. And you see exactly what you got right there. Now, if you hold it while the cable is cooling, of course, that will work as well. But if you just keep working gentle, you're golden. And like I said, It'll just mold itself in and get over. Right there. Now we'll check our foot. See, the conductors are in. Like I said, by heating them, they are now molded. Everything is set there. And you'll see when we close this up, we'll do it this way. We have that excess piece that we did not need. Don't be afraid of wasting a little heat shrink. It's easy. Just take your scissors, cut them, move on. And now you see the process. Everything here is done right. Magic happens. And there we go. So you can see now how this is centered. I like to keep that centered, and everything is set. Everything is good. Now, we've got a set screw, and this is very, very small, approximately 2 millimeters. And set screw uses a flathead screwdriver, which means you are not going to use extreme torque. I cannot emphasize that enough. Guys feel that they're tightening very, very heavy bolts, and you're not. You do want to apply Loctite. This is blue Loctite 242. And this way, this screw is removable. Now, I personally like to apply the Loctite to the hole itself. Done. And I'll apply it also to the screw. We're good. Loctite will make a mess. I hope they're watching this video. They need to redo their packaging. Their engineering for their packaging sucks. But other than that, it works great. That back. Okay. We'll bring this up. Once again, a magnetic screw helps in the sense that taking the time. Just take your time. You do not want to cross thread this screw. Right out. Now I'm not tightening it all the way. I'm going to clean it. Clean off excess Loctite. What I want to do is check and make sure my position did not change, in which case it did not. So now I'll come in here, a little pressure. Done. That's it. And that's all we need to do there. Now, we are going to bring on our first piece of double wall heat shrink. And we want this to appear to be a molded on connection. And in order to do so, we have to take this heat shrink, which is once again double wall and is a 3-time shrink ray, meaning it will reduce itself in size by 3 times its outer diameter if required. Make sure everything is clean. It's cleanliness is next to godliness. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we check everything. You can naturally see the outer diameter of this is much larger than the hole it's going to go into. This is where we have to be precise. We're going to take the heat gun once again, the precision one, and I'm just going to heat, and I go underneath, and when it starts heating, I just move it carefully. Because we don't want to activate the adhesive to where it locks itself in place. That would be a no-no. So when we come over here, I come in, and patience is a virtue. Little by little. Done. And you'll notice, even though you take the heat away, it will still adjust. So now, like magic, you are in. First piece of double wall heat shrink. Okay, so the double wall heat shrink is inserted inside of the spindle's casing, meaning the plug casing. You can see it right there. When I go to shrink this now, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. The reason I start at the top naturally is if there's a problem, meaning air is trapped in here or something, sometimes occasionally, very occasionally, you'll get a bubble. You want to stop before sealing the entire piece or it's much harder to remove. So again, This comes from experience. This comes from understanding what you're working with, and everything here should be done with that slowest smooth, smoothest fast pace. Now I put the heat gun down, everything is set. Make sure everything is locked. And we'll start at the top, and you'll see I'll just sneak in there and work my way around, just like this. Now we start working it down. You're looking good. Now I'll place the heat gun down. As this starts cooling off, now I can pivot and just keep that rolling to where we got that heat just constantly moving. Right there. Okay, you've done it right when you get a little bit of bleed through of that adhesive on the edge. And you can see it right there coming through. This looks awesome. Come up, keep it down at the top. Go inside there. Okay, that's the first piece. We let it cool for a second. We do not want to bend this. We want to keep it straight while it's cooling. We're going to apply another piece of double wall heat shrink over this to double laminate it. Why do we do that? First and foremost, when you put your stress relief on the cable, the thicker heat shrink is going to make sure this cable lasts forever, especially when it has the adhesive and its double wall heat shrink. The other reason is that you want this cable to be the most rigid where it plugs into the spindle motor, because we don't want to have wear up here from where this cable will be hanging. So again, it's hard to explain if you've not seen a spindle motor, but rest assured the idea of the double lamination here will assure that this cable will not flex at the base of where it plugs into the spindle, which is not a good thing. So needless to say, now that we're cool, we're going to bring up the other piece of heat shrink. And this is how cables appear to be molded. This is the effect you're going to get when done properly. So you pull up and you notice I'm just inserting this right inside. So here we go. Once again, cleanliness is next to godliness. Dust is okay, it's going to happen. You don't want too much. So we're good right here. And once again, you can see now, here's the joint from where the piece of heat shrink is already on the cable from underneath. And we got to do the same process now. And this is where you got to be careful. We're going to melt this, melt this. When I say melt it, the heat shrink is going to go and shrink. And once it shrinks to the proper diameter, we can insert it inside the cable, the cable's connector. So we'll start low. You'll see a little heat, and you see I'm just constantly feathering. Done. Because it will continue to melt by itself. Done. Once again, we want to do this carefully because we don't want that adhesive to lock. So once you get that diameter looking pretty good, let it cool a second because we don't want to demold the heat shrink and make it wrinkled and bubbled and other things. So what we want to do now is just carefully come up, and if we did this right, it's like magic. There you go. So then I push up. Now you can see when this shrinks, you're going to have a seam here, and this is going to be doubled. So it's actually the thickness of the heat shrink in this general area will be 4 times the thickness of the casing. So it'll be very, very rigid, which is exactly what we want. Once again, we're going to start at the head of the spindle's plug, work our way down. Naturally, if there's any problem, you want it to be up here rather than all the way down here and make it more of a hassle to remove the piece of double-walled heat shrink should you have to. Let's say a prayer, and we should be golden. We'll start right here, work our way around. Being we've got nice clearance in there, it should just mold right in, just like that. Same principle. Do the rotisserie. See our seam coming out beautiful. There you go. Now you can see. First piece of double wall heat shrink underneath, you can see where it seals, totally molded. Okay. Now, we are going to apply our stress relief. Stress relief is just going to come right here, and you will press, and by pressing the stress relief, it more or less molds itself on. But once again, it does confirm that this must be assembled with precision by hand. And if you're doing these in bulk, you can rest assured most of them are not coming out like this. I can guarantee you that. Stress relief has got a little ridge in it. You can see it right here. It goes to the rear. You will press down on this to where it's fully seated. Once it's seated, of course, it needs to be screwed in. Those are Phillips head screws. And we'll begin the process. Very easy. Now, start your threading process. 1, 2. Now what I'm doing, I don't know if you can get this on camera, I'm holding with my index finger and my thumb, I'm keeping pressure up as if then I can feel this coming down as I screw it, meaning I can feel the stress relief coming closer to the cable as I screw the threads. This way I can adjust how much I screw each one of these screws to make sure that I'm approximating the pressure evenly all the way through. In, go about a quarter turn. And we want to keep it close. And the main reason we want to keep it close is these screws should be as close to evenly tensioned as possible. And as you get close to the cable, you'll feel it with your fingers. You can feel it's slightly off or it needs a slight adjustment. There we go. Coming in. Now I'm going to press. And we're going to press right here. Press right here. Now I'm going to check them. What I'm checking for is how much thread is coming out of the base of the casing. Okay, so we want to get them about even. You can see right here, this portion. And we'll look at it one more time. And again, this is all by eye. but it should be very close. As you do this more, you will get very, very good at determining how much should be coming out. Now, stress relief should be tight enough to make contact with the cable with slight pressure. Should not be ridiculous pressure the way you're actually clamping it, more like a vice grip. We're not trying to do that. Once again, we're checking our thread. Give me a little light over here. Show a little light on this. Hold on. That mic. There we go. You can see the thread right here. So we're just checking and checking. And then I'll rotate. And you can look at it across and sight across it and get a pretty good idea of where we're at. Now we'll come in just a little more, and just a little more, and I think we're golden. You want the gap on your stress relief even across the bridge of where the base of the casing is for the connector. You can see right there, we are looking very nice. That's us. Over here. Good. Good. One more check. You notice I pause, and the reason I do that, it's much easier to take a visual snapshot of where you're at. I go in slow, and you're in. Pull it out. Okay. Good. And done. Okay, looking good. And this is it. Done. Now to finish this, check your clearance again on your seam. That looks good. All we're going to do is apply Loctite to the ends of these screws, because once again, we do not want to have any issues with screws coming loose due to vibration, which is naturally inherent of a CNC robot. And how I do this is I like to use a toothpick, because the toothpick will allow me to just touch the end of that screw without making a mess. And if we're careful, should be gold. I'm going to use it like a bridge, and you'll see it'll just fill them threads. Done. That's one. You see the blue right there? See all of our blue. That's one. And that's got Loctite on it. Now we come over here. We do the same thing. I'm going to arc this. Done. That's two. No mess. You can see that seam right there. Do up. Boom, boom. You get a nice patch of thread lock right on those threads. See them? See it right there? See it right there. Okay, now to finish the cable, we're going to add deoxit gold to its terminals, all four of them. You can see it says 1, 2, see it? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is of course ground. Now what we're going to do is do this carefully. This is just a little brush. This stuff is very expensive and is amazing at protecting and enhancing the connection. NASA does use this. Put it in. And your cable is now ready for testing. Now this is a plugged spindle cable. And of course, why it's plugged is because it has the plug installed on it. It is not a fully assembled spindle cable in that the other end is not completed. So that just tells you the model of the cable. Certain end users will want to install the ring connectors themselves. They don't want to do this because this takes more skill. And you can see that's all set to go. So now We will do a test on our cable, make sure continuity is good. Continuity simply meaning that the conductors that run all the way the length of the cable are not broken or frayed, and that their integrity is where it should be. Pull out the Fluke 179 True RMS and make sure everything is done the way you would expect it done for your cable. Naturally, you touch the probes together, you have contact. So when you hear that tone, we've got continuity. Naturally, lower numbers on your ohms rating is what you're shooting for, because the lower the number is, the less resistance you have. As we go through this, here's the end of the cable. And what I'll do is I'll just arbitrarily, I'm going to start with pin 4, which is our ground. And we'll come over here and right on the money. You'll see these numbers typically drop as the deoxide, it's very cold right now, as the deoxide penetrates the connector. Usually you'll see those numbers drop. There you go. Done. So 4 is good. Check one more time. Good. 1, 2, 3. What I'm doing now is confirming that the other leads, not pin 4, but the other remaining leads have no continuity, meaning that they are not making contact with the number 4 pin on the spindle plug, which is exactly what you would want. You only want it to be making contact with the ground lead because that's the allocation of that pin on the spindle plug. That's good. Now we're going to go to terminal 1. Okay, 1 is color white. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Go backwards. Nothing, nothing, nothing. The other way. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And now back to white. So once again, pin number 1 is white. We can write that. Anyways, let's go to pin number 2. Is black. Now we check the other terminals. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Once again, the opposite direction. 1, 2, 3, all nothing. And then nothing, 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 and back to black. And you'll see down 1, 2, we're right on. Okay, 2 is black. And 3 is red. And that's perfect. So we'll check ground nothing, black nothing, white nothing. Once again, white nothing, black nothing, ground nothing, and go back to red. And you're dead on. Perfect. So once again, 1 is white, 2 is black, 3 is red, and 4 is green, and you're golden. Green and yellow, actually, it's green yellow stripe. This cable has been now confirmed, and for a plug spindle cable version of an assembled spindle cable, it is now considered complete, and it will be wound up carefully and shipped to the client.